Hey guys, how's it going out there in the world, I guess? And here I am in Erbil, Kurdistan region of Iraq, right in the middle of all the action. We are literally on the flight path between Iran and Israel. So every time they start shooting missiles at each other, we get in the way. And now, of course, they're shooting missiles. At least Iran is shooting missiles at any U.S. base in the Middle East. So we got a couple major ones here in Erbil, particularly at the airport. So the airport's closed. Missiles and drones are coming in, and of course, there's always a lot of debris, especially because of the interceptors. They'll blow up a missile or a drone, and then that drone is going to crash somewhere other than it was supposed to crash. It's supposed to crash at the U.S. base, and a couple have, right? A couple of them have caused mass, and Lucy's going to get a little toothbrushing. You sure are. She's not very happy about it. So anyway, that's the situation we have here. And but what I want to do today, come on, Lucy. Oh, yes, indeed. Oh, that's good. That's good. Oh, that's good. It's tasty. What I want to do today is discuss, because all these idiots, like total idiots, you say, well, we won in Iraq and that was so easy. It was a cakewalk, blah, blah, blah. And they have no idea that, just because they start with IRA, Iraq and Iran are not anywhere near similar. And this is not to diminish the courage and bravery of the Iraqi people versus the Iranian people. There's a lot of reasons why it was a lot easier for us to take over Iraq in 2003 than it will be to try to take over Iran. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to attempt to bring up a map that hopefully will help us understand the situation better. And unfortunately, what I have to do is constantly go back and forth. This is because I don't have a very good command of what you might call technology. So first, I'm going to give you a map of the whole region, and I'm going to make it a topographical map because that's what I'm going to need. Yeah, that works. So let me go ahead back and get that on my live stream. So we're going to see in a second here a beautiful map of the area, and I might go in on it every now and again. But here we have, and let's just use this map. I'm a liberal, and as such, I believe in the rule of law. I'm also a realist, right? Realist means that sometimes you have to bend the law, maybe, right? So, for example, the United States was attacked on 9/11. They destroyed World Trade Center, where incidentally I used to work, and they also, they did a bunch of things, right? They caused mass terror, right? At that time, who was let's say the whole situation may have been avoided if he had just kept his eye on the ball. They told him when they were going out, there are these plans to do some kind of massive attack. We have we have a commission, I forget what it would set up to deal with it. Make sure you keep it. And the first thing Bush did is disband the task force, right? Literally, he disbanded the task force that was actively engaged in hunting for these terrorists that the Clinton administration told him about. So anyway, went on from that idiocy, he went on to a massive war against Afghanistan, which was completely unnecessary. He could have gone into Afghanistan very easily with, I mean, I understand Osama bin Laden was hiding in Afghanistan. They were hosting Al Qaeda. That with some discreet, maybe some nations, maybe send in SEAL Team 6 or whatever, right? That would have been illegal, but it would have been, right? Instead, he invades the whole country, and for 20 years, we're paying trillions of dollars through the nose to try to develop Afghanistan, and in the end, Trump Taliban everything they wanted. Just before he left off, released thousands and thousands of Taliban fighters. He withdrew any support from the Afghan government. So, he basically set it up so the Afghan government would collapse within weeks of his leaving office, which is what happened. And I'm not going to, Biden says I'm blamed because the guy was, he was slow. I would agree. He was old. He was slow. He should have taken immediate action to reinforce the Taliban government. But keep in mind, we've been there for 20 years. There was very little political support. So anyway, I'm not going to go on with that. But then after Afghanistan, which was, I think, a huge mistake, then Bush went and invaded Iraq. I'm making the same mistake, right? In 2003. And the premise was, well, Iraq has these weapons of mass destruction. You don't want the proof to be a mushroom cloud, blah, blah, blah. They made this huge deal about Iraq having a nuclear power program, a nuclear weapons program, that they were weapons of mass destruction. Man, this guy's giving me a lot of, hey, baby, you got to brush your teeth. Otherwise, you're going to be stinky and nobody's going to want to kiss you, baby. Come on, let's get that. So, there you go. That doesn't hurt. Hey, come on. Gotta hold your mouth. I don't want that. I don't want you licking all the. So, this was the premise. The legal route. He lied through his teeth, or at least they any evidence they had. They overlooked contradictory evidence of which there was an abundance, and but he at least tried to legally go through some kind of going to the UN, doing this, doing that. In the end, nobody believed him entirely, but he kind of had some justification. In any case, my point is the invasion of Iraq was clearly illegal, as from my point, but at least it was competently carried out, right? So if you look at the map of Iraq, right, here's Iraq. Now, Iraq is a country with three main ethnic groups. There are other minor ethnic groups, with three main ethnic groups. There's Muslims. Shia Muslims are closely, well, historically, Shia, the center of Shia is Iran. So we'll get to that later. But Shia Muslims are very large, basically almost half the population in Iraq. Then you have Sunni Muslims. Sunni Muslims are more attached to like Saudi Arabia in a religious context. So, the Muslim world is divided into two main religious sects. One is the Shia, which is centered in Iran, and one is the Sunni, which is centered in Saudi Arabia. And I'm not going to get into the details on that, maybe on some future things. Lots of sources on the web that you can kind of get an idea of what the difference is between these two groups. But this is a schism that happened, kind of like the Protestant versus Catholic schism in Christianity that caused a lot of civil wars. So this schism happened in very soon after Islam emerged in the 8th century, according to Christian address timeline, and has been present. There have been countless wars between Shia and Sunnis, but it's not like a constant state of warfare, but there's a lot of tension. Right? Now, so Shia Muslims occupy mostly the south of Iran up to the middle, so Baghdad has a very large Shia population. Basically, half the population of Baghdad is Shia. Then the Sunni, they occupy mostly the central region of Iraq, I hope you can see my thing. And again, like I said, about half the population of Baghdad, Sunni Muslims, right? There are still a substantial number of Christians, by the way, maybe about 5%, but dwindling proportion of the Iraqi population. And then there's another group called the Kurds. The Kurds are a group that in Iraq is primarily in the north of Iraq. And as you can see, this mountainous region, right? See these mountains here? These dark areas are mountain zones, right? This is a topographic map. Now, above here is Turkey. Down here is Kuwait. Over here is Saudi Arabia. Over here is Jordan. Over here is Syria. And of course, over here is Israel, right? And of course, here is Iran, right? So like I say, I'm in Erbil, which is where this like little red. So as you can see, a lot of from come over Erbil, not a huge amount because they can shoot missiles basically from anywhere in this mountain range. Look at how big this mountain range is. This is the size of the Appalachian mountain range in the United States. It's massive, right? Maybe not that big, but it's big, right? What do we say about this situation? Okay, so as I was saying, the war in Iraq was illegal, as at least as far as, you know, there was no legal justification for it. We invaded Iraq. There was some pretense at creating a legal justification. Oh, they're making bomb destruction. They're going to attack us imminently. We don't want the proof to be a mushroom cloud, right? But, you know, you could say that they actually thought they were doing the right thing. Right? But with that said, let's just think about the operational side. So the legality, illegality deals with the strategic issues, right? When a country does things illegally, it steadily over time loses its strategic position, right? So you might know the military terms tactics and strategy, right? Strategy has to do with the overarching best interests of whatever a country, war or peace even. So strategy can apply to anything. In wartime, we would look at, for example, Napoleon. I want to take over the world. I'm going to start with Italy, then I'll go into Austria, then I'll go into Germany, and this will cut off other potential allies, right? So that's strategy. You're looking at the big picture and saying, well, this is my goal. This is how I'm going to do about it. I won't attack the target directly. I'm going to go around the edge till I get there, or I will do something that may seem very different, right? So a strategic choice would be like, for example, in World War II, the Kriegsmarine trying to blockade England with submarines, right? That's a strategic choice because it's long-term. It doesn't have to do with any particular battle or military operation, but it's like a general, okay, this is an objective we have to do in order to get to our goal, which is to force Great Britain into submission. Obviously, as we know from our history books, and we don't speak German, it didn't work, right? Other strategic decisions. Hitler thought, if I invade Russia and I defeat Russia, that will force England to submit. So rather than just attacking England, right, with a marine attack, he said, well, if I attack Russia and beat them, and in his mind, Russia was an easier, because Russia was competent, and there was a lot of evidence for that, but it turns out Hitler's wrong, right? He attacked Russia, and that ended up weakening him so that eventually England and the United States could come in and attack him in other areas, and he was defeated, right? So strategic decisions have to do with the big picture, and if our end goal is victory, but what are the specific objectives along the way, right? Tactics has to do with, well, if you're in a battle, right, you've got X, Y, Z resources, these resources, right? So in a tactical situation, I'm in a battle, I have so many guns, I have so many soldiers, I have so many infantry versus tanks versus planes. How can I use this most effectively to win this battle, right? So Tactics can never win a war because you can't win a war by winning battles, right? The many wars have been lost, even though, for example, the Vietnam War, the Americans never lost a battle, right? Because we had overwhelming superiority every time we went into battle, right? So we, very smart tactically, but we still lost the war, right? So we lost the strategy. How do we lose the strategy in Vietnam? Because even though we won every battle, our strategy was only military. We didn't have, as Sun Tzu would say, right, the ancient art of war. You have to have a psychological strategy too, right? You have to go in and make the enemy realize or feel that they're losing. Right? So Americans, like the military was like, well, we're killing 10 Viet Cong for every one American soldier. We're doing fine. But you know what? For the Viet Cong, they weren't Viet Cong. They were women and children for the most part. But anyway, them getting killed just made them matter. And Americans, them getting killed was a bummer. Right? They didn't get angry at the Viet Cong because the Americans could see the Viet Cong are just defending themselves, right? Whereas, they're like, you, our leaders, are the ones who are putting in this situation. You're the ones sending us to go fight and die, right? So that was the strategy. We didn't have a strategy for winning the war on a psychological level. And I'm not saying that because I think we should have had or we would have won it. It was impossible, right? And that's what American military leaders, you see, the military leaders are not, that's not their job. That's the job of politicians, right? That's why we hate politicians, right? But the job of politicians, I mean, again, I don't want to go drag this out, but, for good or for bad, it's their job to basically identify strategically what is in the best objectives of the country and persuade the American people to support them in doing that, right? And then try to implement it, right? That's their job, right? And what happened in Vietnam? Well, no American leader wanted to admit that they had any real goals in Vietnam. He was just like, well, we're just helping out the French. We're just helping out the local Southern Vietnamese democratic government. We're just doing this. We're just doing, and the point is, they're like creeping into a full-scale war until we had 500,000 troops in the war. We're conscripting soldiers from farms and from inner city ghettos to go fight in the war. And not once did they ever properly explain why we're doing this. What is this, except this very vague, well, it's a domino effect. If Vietnam falls, next thing is Cambodia, next thing is this, and then suddenly it's Mexico is going to be communist, right? So they did not enunciate or even have a clear strategic goal. They had this muddy goal, this is part of the Cold War, and people never got population from day one was, and even the most redneck, MAGAized, because they were at that time, but whatever the equivalent was, the kind of people who just go, they were just like, well, it's going to be a good thing because, we got to support our military. Right? Nobody articulated. So when you think, it's not just about who we're going to conquer next. It's about what are we doing this for? Why? That's what strategy is about. It's what and why, right? And remember, that's not just a military. That is a political, cultural consideration, right? Yeah, people can understand. We don't want communism controlling the whole world, but why? What has Vietnam got to do with this? What is bombing rice paddies in Vietnam got to? What is killing innocent children? What is my son or daughter going and getting killed in Vietnam got to do with any of this? Right? So, political pundits have come up with, mission creep and this, and these terms are stupid. The end of the point is, if we're doing something in the world, military, we should have a clear strategic goal, right? We didn't have that in Vietnam. We had it in World War II, right? There was a clear enemy. People were united behind it, right? Boom. And what happened? We mobilized. There was very little griping. There was a lot of disagreement before World War II broke out. A lot of people in America were kind of supportive of the Nazis. Whatever. I won't get into that. But the point is, once we committed, the whole population was committed, right? That was a committed war. That's why people say, "Oh, it was the war. That was our last good war." Whatever. I'm not going to get into that discussion. The point is, we did not have that clarity in Korea. We certainly didn't have that clarity in Vietnam or in almost any other military invention we've had since then. And certainly we did not have it in 2003 in Iraq. Maybe in 1991, when Iraq invaded Kuwait, there was more clarity and agreement. I mean, certainly international agreement. I think in America there was agreement. This was clear. Iraq had invaded a foreign country. Iraq had its reasons, or at least its own justification. I'm not saying they were right. But they, whatever. I'm not getting into. The point is, strategically, the invasion of Iraq in 2003 was a mistake. It was not part of a clear, coherent policy. But now here's the third level, operational, right? You have the tactical level, you have the strategic level. In the middle, you have the operational level. This is the level at which you get things done, right? So the strategy, here's your strategy. The clarity of the strategy may or may not be clear, as it was in Iraq. I believe it was not. In Afghanistan, it was not, right? And I say that from both a military and a social political context, right? Americans were not clear why the hell are we in Afghanistan for 20 years? Maybe the initial invasion to get the Al-Qaeda, okay, but 20 years? And in Iraq, basically the same situation. But operationally, both Afghanistan and Iraq were functional. In other words, operations has to do with how you actually carry out the military attack. It incorporates logistics, supply chain, procurement. Do you have the right type of hardware? Do you have the right? Have them all in the right place, right? Now in Iraq, right, we had about 500,000 troops, more than 500,000 troops. We had 450,000 American troops, about 50,000 British troops, and we had also the support of the Kurdish Peshmerga, which is calculated to be about 70,000 troops, right? So the Kurdish Peshmerga were part of, since the first Iraq War, they were not an independent country because the United States didn't support that. Maybe they should have, right? But the United States said, "Oh, don't become independent. We need you as part of Iraq to be kind of like a mediating force," right? So I don't know why Kurdistan didn't declare independence in 1991, but this is another whole issue point I will get involved with, right? But for some reasons, Kurdistan did not declare independence when they had the chance, right? And that is kind of a motif in Kurdish history. People say, why isn't there a Kurdish state? Kurds make up like 50 million people in this region between Iraq, Turkey, Iran, and Syria. But they've never been an independent country. Because every time, my opinion, that they had an opportunity, they let it drop. Anyway, I will have maybe write a book about that. We'll see. Okay, so you have Kurdistan. So that means you had Kurdish forces supported by U.S. special forces and parachute forces attacking from the north down into Iraq. Now, look at this map. Iraq is flat. It's open plains. Right? The only mountainous region of Iraq is here in Kurdistan, which was already in American hands at the beginning of the campaign, right? Because of the Kurds, right? The American and British forces were concentrated in Kuwait because, like I say, the Bush administration, the W. Bush administration was unable to persuade the Saudis or anybody else to support it, right? Because like I said, he was, weapons, but nobody really believed him, right? Kuwait did, because remember, Kuwait, we liberated Kuwait from Iraq in 1991, so you can imagine they felt obligated. So basically we said, you're going to support us, right? Without Kuwait, there is no way we could have invaded Iraq. No. We had 500,000 troops, 500,000 to 600,000 troops. You don't just land those troops and advance, right? People think Normandy, well, we landed 10,000 troops, whatever, 30,000 troops on D-Day, and then we reinforced them, and every day we landed another 50,000, and it was fine, it was great, it was brilliant. Yeah, but you were coming from England, which was 20 miles away, maximum 50 miles from the supply depots to, well, maybe 100, whatever. It was close. And it was, the United States had already built up massive amounts of stocks and supplies. They were not bringing stuff over from the United States at that point. Everything was already in England on the southern coast, ready to go to France, right? Here, where are you going to get supplies from? None of the countries around were going to support. Turkey refused to support the invasion. We had a whole several infantry divisions in Turkey ready to attack and support the. We had to end up dropping them in by parachute. Some of them in by parachute because Turkey refused. Nobody agreed to help. If Kuwait had refused to help, there would have been no invasion in 2003. So blame Kuwait, right? Anyway, my point is this. Once you have Kuwait, basically that's your staging area, then boom, you just go straight up. This is totally flat. There are roads, right? This is the Tigris-Euphrates River Valley, right? The famous, why we call this Mesopotamia. Between two rivers, the famous Mesopotamia, it runs from basically Turkey and Syria down to the Persian Gulf, right? And this is an ancient causeway. This is part of the old Silk Road. It's the reason why this has been literally the center of civilization for whatever, 10,000 years, let's say, right? Ur, Babylon, the Assyrians, right? Just go on, right? So literally, you can drive from Basra to Baghdad in 4 hours if you have good traffic conditions. Probably not now because of all the potholes, right? So, you're in Kuwait, boom, 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 you're in Baghdad, right? Literally, it took them about 4 or 5 days to get to Baghdad. Why? Because this is open, 5 tanks straight through it. Not necessarily on the road, they're tanks, so you can go through the desert. It's flat, right? It's flat all the way to Baghdad. You can bypass, along the river valley, of course, there are a lot of big cities. Those were the big Nasiriyah and other places along the way. Here's Nasiriyah right here, right? These were the stumbling blocks. But, they didn't need that. They just go around. Boom. Your helicopter divisions, infantry, right? It was literally a cakewalk. In the meantime, the Iraqi army had about 500,000 soldiers. You might think, well, this is a pretty big army. But their equipment was incredibly antiquated. They were relying on ancient 30, 40-year-old Russian tank designs, which just blew up. Just literally seeing an American tank would make them blow up, right? Because the American tanks could shoot at 2-3 kilometers, very accurate, armor-piercing rounds, right? They would take out entire Iraqi tank divisions without losing a single tank. Not even tanks, just APCs with missiles. Boom, 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 boom. Go in, 10 missiles, 10 tanks down. Right? The Iraqis pretty much figured out, as soon as we see an American tank or a helicopter, we're bugging out. And they did. Right? Also keep in mind this ethnic division, right? Iraq had a dictator called Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein's power base was on the Sunni tribes, right? He was from Tikrit, which is a city about in this area, right? in the Sunni tribal territories, right? These are Sunni Arab, right? And, Saddam Hussein was a dictator. He obviously favored or preferred anybody from his tribe. After that, a Sunni Arab. So Shia were bottom of the totem pole. Kurds were constantly being persecuted, so they hated him. The Shia hated him, right? So when the Americans attacked, there was very little operation in the Basra area, basically the Shia areas. The half of the Iraqi army that was made up of Shia conscripts just melted away, right? The only resistance was what they called the Republican Guard, who usually had slightly better equipment and training and things like that. And they were certainly more loyal, and they were the ones who put up a bit of resistance. But by that time, you're talking about maybe 50,000 against 500,000 Allied troops. They really stood no choice. So you may remember the famous picture of Baghdad Bob, Saddam Hussein's PR person, and he was on the top of the palace in Baghdad saying, "American tanks, there are no American tanks. American tanks are nowhere near Baghdad." And in the background, you can see the American tanks arriving, right? Now today, instead of Baghdad Bob, we've got that Caroline Levitt, right, doing the same thing. Right? There's no war in Iraq. Oh, there's a war, but we won the war. Oh, the war. We don't need any help from the Allies. Oh, well, the Allies. We don't need their help. Oh, but they're cowards and yeah. That's what Trump says. But Caroline Levitt has to repeat it. Right? So anyway, from an operational standpoint, right, even though I consider the invasion of Iraq to be illegal under international law, from an operational standpoint, you could say it was very well conducted, right, with even what we could call overkill. Right? Now, what I'm going to do is shift from looking at Iraq to looking at Iran. So I'm going to move this map a little bit, and unfortunately, that means I have to exit. And I have to. That's what I have to do. I could do this quicker. But anyway, I'm kind of committed now. So I have to make this even bigger. Jesus. Iran is huge. All right, let me just show you this right now so you see this in context. So this is a map showing the whole of Iran. So this is Iran, right? This is Iraq, right? We went from Kuwait to Iraq. I mean, you can literally drive that in 5 or 6 hours, right? It's flat, straight roads or straight over the desert, maybe a little bit slower. Obviously, over the desert, it's going to take you a couple of days, right? It took them literally 5 or 6 days to get tank divisions to Iraq, and that was with occasional opposition. This is Iran. Right, look how big that country is, right? It goes all the way here, the Indian Ocean, all the way the entire Gulf, Persian Gulf, then up to Turkey, then across the Caspian Sea, Turkmenistan. There's no comparison, right? Now I'm going to zoom in. If I can figure this out. So before I zoom away from this map, looks like I already did, right? Just the size. Now look at all of this, right? Remember I said there was a small area of mountains in Iraq that was controlled by the Kurds. So our allies already controlled those mountains. So that meant the Iraqis could not retreat into the mountains for a final last stand, right? They had nowhere to go. Right? If they retreated to the north, to the mountain, the Kurds held that, and believe me, the Kurds were not going to let them through. Right? And they had a couple thousand U.S. troops, paratroopers, and special forces to back them up. British also, right? Iran is all mountains. So those little area of mountains in Kurdistan, Iraq, are just a massive mountain chain, right? which goes all the way down here in the Persian Gulf side of Iraq. Sorry. In addition, there's this huge, massive mountain range at the top, which covers the border with the Caspian Sea, with Turkey, with Turkmenistan. Over here, you have mountain chains between Afghanistan and Pakistan, but that's not really much of a threat issue, right? There is some open land here between Iraq and Iran. This was the area that Iraq and Iran fought in 8 years, right? This area. It's a very fertile, flat area. Iraq considered this to be part of historically Iraq. And Iran, of course, considered it to be part of Iran. So I'm not getting into that, right? But there was no way Iraq was trying to attack over the mountain. There were skirmishes in the mountains, but mostly in the mountain areas, they were left alone. The only exception is when Saddam Hussein used American-supplied poisons to massacre a city in Kurdistan, Kurdish Iraq called, I just had the name on my head, but I've just forgot it. Everybody's going to hate me. Anyway, so this area is relatively flat, but this area is all mountains. You see the mountains here, they come all the way to the coastline. If you swim or boat coastline, you will just see mountains. These are mountains. And these mountains are thousands and thousands of feet high, right? Not only that, but these mountains are in ridges, right? There's one ridge, that you pass that ridge, you go into a valley, then you have to climb another ridge, you pass that ridge, you go into a valley. And in between the ridges, or there are roads cut through the ridges by nature usually. And that's the only way to get through in this area. You go through these mountain passes through these ridges, and these are ambush zones, right? I mean, you cannot get over these mountains unless you literally push troops over the mountains. Tanks, you cannot use tanks in this kind of warfare. This is like Italy, the Italian campaign in World War II, right? The Germans, even though the Italians sided with the Allies, the Germans were able to hold the mountain passes against far superior American and Allied numbers. I shouldn't just say Americans. There were Aussies there. There were New Zealanders there. There were Polish troops. There were a lot of different British troops too, right? Right? We had overwhelming superiority. We could not get past those. And believe me, these mountain passes have us incredibly well defended. You will not be able to get any kind of motorized vehicle through those passes. The only thing you can do is literally climb up the mountain with infantry, inch by inch, fight your way up, right? And good luck, because that's a suicide mission. And you have to do it not just once. You have to do it 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times. This is what happened to us in Korea. Right? This is why Korea turned into such a bloody war. Right? Americans don't realize this. We lost masses of troops in Korea because we were fighting uphill against defended positions. Right? Vietnam, we lost massive numbers of troops. We lost more troops in Vietnam in the whole of World War II because we were fighting against an enemy that was able to hide in the jungle. Right? Here it's hill territory. Right? And that hill territory surrounds Tehran. So Tehran is right here in the middle, more or less, where Tehran, I believe, is here, right? It is literally protected by the mountains on every side, right? You have to fight through this valley to get to Tehran. You have to fight through another set of hills, right? So who the heck would do this? How many troops would you need? Keep in mind, Iran has 1 million people. And although there is some ethnic diversity in Iran, I mean, there are Kurds there are Azeris, there are some Christians, there are some Afghanis, right, Pakistanis. So wherever you have a country with borders, you have some overlapping of populations in those border zones. Let's say maybe 20% of the Iranian population are not pure Iranian Shia. But that means 80% are, right? So Iran, from an ethnic point of view, is more united or I wouldn't say use the word united, because obviously you have differences even within an ethnic group, but they're more ethnically coherent, right? Which is something that, MAGA Americans should understand, because they're always screaming about how diversity creates weakness and this, that, and the other. So in any case, they do not have the weakness Iraq had, where half or more than basically 60% of the population were in open or silent rebellion against the regime, right? Iran does not have that. You saw the mass uprisings, but believe me, this is not the majority of the Iranian population. The majority of the Iranian population, 80% of them, are Shia Muslims. There are a few Sunnis, there are a few Christians, but from an ethnic standpoint, they're very unified. Politically, yes, there have been a lot of complaints about the Iraqi regime, the Ayatollah, the suppression, the incompetence, the emphasis on military buildups as opposed to providing a decent living for their population. The Iranian regime has a lot of sins, right? But let me see if I can zoom in right now. A little bit on this map. Right, so that makes it a little bit clearer, right? They do not have, there is political divisions. Yes, a lot of people oppose the government, but they don't have the additional religious and ethnic divisions underneath that to a large extent. And, when, this is what tends to happen. When a country is attacked, there's a tendency for people to unite behind the government. England was heavily divided against about joining the war against Germany. Should we side with Germany or fight with Germany? It wasn't a clear case even in England, but when bombs started dropping on London, you can bet that it became very clear, right? And suddenly anybody who even had a moment of thought about poor Adolf Hitler, suddenly they were out, right? Same thing in the U.S., right? There was a lot of division in the U.S., a very powerful pro-German movement, or at least anti-getting involved in the war movement. But once bombs dropped on Pearl Harbor, that was it. Forget it. We were all in, right? America ended up out-producing, out-soldiering, out-gunning every other country in the world combined. Right? But that's because they were unified by what? By being attacked, and especially being attacked in a dastardly way, right? What was happening? We were negotiating with Japan, right? We were trying to get them to get out of China, right? Japan does a sneak attack, and instantly the American population went from maybe 1% of the time they check up on what's happening with this negotiation with Japan to 100% anti-Japanese and anti-German, because Japan and Germany were already confirmed allies, right? So that is the social political strategy, right? By attacking somebody in a dastardly way, you instantly turn the strategical situation in their favor, right? So maybe I get too excited, but we were in the middle of negotiations with Iran. We have this sneak attack, wiping out 50 of their leaders, and you know what? Even that might have been forgiven, but we had to go ahead and blow up a whole school of children. I believe in this town, Minab. Right? If I'm not mistaken, I'm on the wrong page. Right? Minab is down here. That's where the school was. We blew up a naval station, but we forgot that 10 years ago, one of the buildings had been designated as a school and separated from the naval station. And somehow we never got that memo. We never bothered to check it out because our administration and Pete Hegseth specifically had specifically disbanded our Office of Ethics that would check into making sure that every strike was planned in a way that minimized collateral damage. Pete Hegseth, you may have seen that guy bouncing around like a stage, around the stage like an overgrown orangutan. We don't care about innocent children. We just shoot. We don't care. We're going to shoot first. That's okay. You know what? He killed 170 children, 0 soldiers. They double tapped because there's a missile going overhead, and the missile is programmed to hit the target again if it saw activity. And it saw all these little kids trying to get out of the building, and the missile said, "Oh, people still alive." They hit it again. Right? And you know what happened to our strategic advantage? If we had any at that point, it went from 0 to minus 5,000. And the Iraqi leadership advantage went from minus 500, because everybody, even in Iran, hated them, to 1 billion. Right? And then they're standing up and they're saying, we're not going to accept any negotiation. You can come and kill us because we will be martyrs. And the Shia believe, somewhat sincerely, I think, that if you are martyred in a good cause, like you're killed while defending the faith, you will go to heaven immediately, no matter what you've done in life, and you will get 72 virgins forever. I don't know if they stay virgins, I don't know. But you'll get them. Right? That's what they're told. And so here we have a situation where we've just strategically created a massive advantage for Iran. All right. Anyway, so that's not my point. My point is more operational. So here we go. What's the situation? Do we have anywhere from where we can launch any kind of invasion against Iran? All right. Could we do it through the north? No, because Russia is not our ally. Russia is Iran's ally, and they are shipping goods to Iran through the Caspian Sea as we speak, right? Drones, technology, whatever they want, right? Iran is shipping back oil, right? They're getting their oil out of the country because now there are no longer any, right? He's launched a war against Iran. In theory, we have sanctions on Russia, but he's just released all the sanctions because, oh my God forbid the price of oil go up and Americans have to pay an extra $1 at the gasoline station. That's what he's worried about, right? So they're making more money, and that means the entire North, so I won't go through all the countries, basically nobody is supporting this war. Right? Even the countries being attacked by Iran, so Iraq, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, the EAU, the United Arab Emirates, UAE, right? Doha, all of these are technically allies of the United States, or in some sense have agreements, defense agreements. They will not lift a finger to help us, even though they'd be literally bombed by Iran. Because you know what would happen if they did? Their own people would tell their leaders, no, Iran has every right to blow up U.S. bases. And if we have U.S. bases in our country, Iran can blow the crap out of them, and we don't care. Believe me, this is what people in Iraq think, people in Kuwait, people in Saudi Arabia, people in Qatar, people in Doha. This is why you see nobody protesting the Iranians anywhere. In any of these countries, you don't see any protests outside the Iranian embassy. You see protests against American embassy because America already lost the strategic war, right? And some of these countries, like Saudi Arabia, has a substantial Shia population. Iraq obviously is half Shia. Well, Iraq is almost a colony of Iran. Bahrain is mostly Shia, right? So all of these countries, this is why you might ask yourself, hold on, all these countries, they're supposed to be our allies. They're being bombed by Iran, right? This is what the Trump administration can't figure out because they're so stupid. They said, why aren't you guys helping? Why isn't NATO helping you? Why aren't you helping? Because on the first hour, without any coherent reason, without making any justification, in the middle of negotiations, and you happen to kill 200 children, 150, whatever, in a girls' school. that was double tapped. And you're supposed to come back and be like, who knows? You never know. These are things that happen in war. No, these are things that you made happen, not just because you attacked, not just because you did it illegally, not just because you did it irresponsibly, not just because you did it carelessly, but because even after the fact, you couldn't say, oh, I'm sorry. All right, so I'm going on and on. So operationally, we do not have a beachhead. We do not have a base from which to attack Iran, right? This is why they're talking about these like forces of 10,000, 20. What are you going to do with 10,000 people, right? So I had hoped that I would be able to do better than this, but this has already gone on way too long. But if you're gonna stick around, I will try to show you some of the options the supposed brilliant masterminds in the White House have, right? Let's see, I'll put that, okay. I need to pull out just a little bit. Yeah, that'll have to do it. Okay, so let's focus on Cog Island, because everybody's talking about Cog Island for some reason. It's stupid and absurd because there's no way you could possibly attack Cog Island, right? So here is Cog Island. Sorry. Right. Here is Cog Island, right here. You can see Cog, how it's pronounced, right? It is, I guess you could say, of the Persian Gulf, right? The northern, right? Here's Kuwait. Sorry, here's Iraq. Iraq has a very narrow access to the sea. Here's Kuwait. Cog Island is where basically the Iranians have built this massive petrochemical facility for loading tankers, and then the tankers can leave. Now, this is the paradox, right? The Trump administration is saying, well, we can't stop Iranian oil from leaving Iran because, I don't know. I don't understand. If you're trying to punish Iran, all you have to do is close this Hormuz Strait to Iranian ships as well, and just say, look, if other people can't get out, you can't get out. We're gonna confiscate your ships. That's all they need to do. 4 weeks of war, and we have not done that. Iran shut down the strait, but they're still sending out their ships, and nobody's asking us, why aren't we doing the obvious thing and shutting down Iranian ships, or Russian ships, Chinese? Just shut down everybody. Why not? Okay, you see, there's no logic here. Strategically, operationally, there is zero logic. Right? Trump is paranoid. If well, at least there's oil, and this is oil, and instead they're lifting the sanctions on Iranian oil, so that every drop of oil Iran can get out. Okay, that's going to lower the price of oil. Okay, make it make sense. It does. And then they're saying, well, we'll attack Cog, will take away Iran's ability to ship oil. Well, we could take it away by just confiscating their ships, which we could do. We have 3 fleets in the Indian Ocean, right? So why do we need to take the Cog Island? Why? It would only be a symbolic. And in the meantime, here you got 10,000 or 20,000 sitting on this island. You got 20 miles from shore. They could be bombarding with even artillery from anywhere in this area, and they can be sending drones. Stupidest idea. And besides, to get to the Cog Island, you first have to pass through the bloody Hormuz Straits. So let's look at the Hormuz Straits a bit close. Man, I so suck at technology. I do. I'm sorry, guys. All right, so here's the Hormuz Straits, right? See the city Bandar Abbas, Binab, that's where the school was bombed, I believe, right? It's a strait, right? The strait is like the narrow area. I think at this area it's about 10 kilometers. It's very narrow, right? And so ships come in from the Indian Ocean, they land, and then they're in the Persian Gulf, and then they load up with oil or agricultural. Apparently, it's not even oil is the main problem. It's agriculture, fertilizers, right? The worldwide price of fertilizers has doubled. This means farmers have to pay twice as much to prepare their fields, right? And they have no idea whether or not they're going to get that money back. They don't know. This is massive. This is billions. Imagine $500 for an acre of fertilizer. Farm, I'm not 100% own these numbers. Right? So anyway, these ships go their oil or their gas, and then they come back out. And normally they have a protocol, international protocol that takes care of this, and everybody helps to protect those ships. Now, of course, we launched a completely illegal, immoral, and completely strategically irresponsible attack on Iran, right? So what can they do? Iran controls this entire side. There's this tiny country here called Oman, which controls the other side. So in theory, Oman could shut down, but we could take over Oman within 5 minutes, right? It's this tiny country, a couple mountains there, a couple days for sure we could shut them down. Besides, Oman is an ally, whatever, right? But Iran controls this they control, as you can see, most of the coastline. This is about 200 miles. There's this island here, right? A couple islands, actually. Believe me, these are incredibly heavily fortified. In fact, these islands have been used for thousands of years to practice piracy and other forms of control over trade in the strait, right? So one of the biggest headaches throughout human history is that whenever you get a trade route, like between Europe and Asia, every Timbuk dictator along the way will be like, hey, where's my cut? They'll see these people going past with these incredibly rich cargoes, silks and pearls and whatever, gold and silver and myrrh and incense, and they'll be like, well, hold it, where's my cut, right? So we could call them bandits, we could call them barons, whatever you want to call them, right? Every human empire has been built on this trade, right? On taking a percentage, a tax, whatever tariff, whatever you want to call it, out of this trade. And the Persian Gulf has never been an exception, right? Whoever controls this area controls an immense source of wealth, right? You just get 10% of whatever's going through there, and you're more than a king. You're more than an emperor. You are God on earth, right? So this area is seeing a lot of history. Now, all Iran has to do, logistically now, they just have to threaten to fire one missile, one drone, one boat against one of these ships coming through. They do not need a navy, right? The entire navy, I'm satisfied that Trump is correct that we've sunk their entire navy except for a few rowboats and whatever, right? They don't need a navy. They don't need an air force. I'm satisfied that Trump is right that every single Iranian plane has been blown. I don't care. They don't need that. All they need is a couple floating bombs or mines or a couple unmanned boats. Right? See what the Ukrainians have done in Russia about this stuff, right? And that's all they need to do, right? They got this entire period. How long does it take an oil tanker to pass through here? About 2 days. Right? At top speed, it's going to take him about 2 days to pass through here. You got 2 days to shoot at anybody from here, here. It kind of goes on and on, right? There's no way you're getting anything. Even the entire U.S. fleet, if it went through that, it would take a lot of hits, right? Because these are suicide drones. They're not airplanes that come in and drop a bomb, right? These are person view, right? Somebody's directing these. There's a directed drones that are designed with a bomb attachment. They're just going to crash into and of course, for the big ships, you might need a bigger missile to hit them. But believe you hit them enough times, they're going to take some damage. They're going to take a lot of damage. So what are you going to do? You're going to land troops here under fire from all these you're under fire from every single direction? What are you going to do? Land? What are these 10,000 troops going to do? 20,000 troops. You've got maybe 1,000 different defended sites, maybe 10,000 around this area, right? Iran has 1 million soldiers. You can imagine they've got at least 100 or 200,000 soldiers in this region. Maybe just 100,000. Maybe just that's all they need. A couple tank divisions to back them up. Again, remember, they can back up to the mountains. They can retreat into the mountains at any time and shoot at you at leisure from there. They don't need to be right by the coast. They can go up into those mountains and they can shoot at your ships from there to their heart's content. And yeah, they will eventually, we don't have battleships anymore, right? What am I talking about, right? We do not have armored ships. We do not have a ship that is built to withstand a 100-pound bomb because our philosophy has been, well, we have all these anti-missiles. We'll never. We don't have battleships. We don't have the USS sail through there, take 100 and still emerge the other side, not entirely intact, but maybe semi-functional, maybe, right? But not a single U.S. warship would be able to take this. They're not built for that kind of war, right? And this is what the Iranians have done. They've gone back. They've gone forward and back, right? We have an army. We spend $1 billion to build a missile we're going to end up using to take down a $10,000 drone, right? Okay, maybe exaggerate. Maybe it's only $3-4 million to build a missile, right? We are not, in the meantime, they're embedded in these caves. We can't even reach them. We can't even take them out. All they have to do is pop out of the cave a couple times a day. Oh, there's a ship down there. So, there's no way with 10, 20,000, even 500,000, how are you going to support these people? Where are they going to take off from? You cannot have an armada of 500,000 troops all the way from the United States. Our closest potential ally is in Europe. We don't have a single potential ally in the Middle East who will support us in this war by staging an army of 500,000. There's nobody. There's nobody. Nobody in Africa, nobody in Asia, nobody. Even Europe will not support this, right? And the U.S., we don't have any bases that does not require permission, and it's not big enough for 500,000 people, right? So there's nothing you can do with 10,000 troops, 20,000 troops. Let me show you just one more, and then I'm gonna wrap up for the day. I just have one more planned view here of a potential landing site. And I know nobody's going to watch this. If anybody does ever watch this, particularly if you can somehow manage to watch it to the end, please follow, share. I mean, tell people, okay, this is not a military guy, but he makes some sense maybe. Right? Now here is the Indian Ocean. I call it the Indian Ocean. They call it the Gulf of Oman here. Right? So this is the Persian Gulf. Inside the area outside is the Gulf of Oman. This is Oman. This is the part of the Hormuz Strait on the southern side. Here is Dubai. This is the United Arab Emirates. So here you have the situation in this is what we call southern Iran, the bottom of Iran. So there's some space here you could potentially land troops, right? Obviously 10, 20,000 troops is not going to make any strategic or operational sense. It will not, it would just be a simple, we landed troops in Chabahar. We took over 5 ducks. Oh, I'm in the wrong place again. Right? So here's Chabahar, this coastline. In theory, if we landed an army of 500, supply them, resupply them, 500, 600 miles over 3 different mountain ranges to get to Tehran, right? And again, like I said, the Iranian people, they're united. They are going to be fighting. There's maybe 20, 30% who are disaffected, but it's not like Iraq, where they're willing to throw down their weapons. And remember, in Iraq, initially, the vast majority of the population in Iraq either supported the American invasion or were secretly happy about it. And believe me, I've lived here 16 years. I know a lot of people, right? And they were members of the Iraqi system, the Saddam Hussein system, and they were happy. Because believe me, when you have a crazy dictator in charge, life is not good even if you're in favor. Because favor in one moment we know from Donald Trump, right? He'll love you until he hates you, and then you're dead, right? And Saddam Hussein, the only difference is he could make you dead physically, whereas all Donald Trump can do is make you dead, make you feel dead inside. He does that for everybody. So you did not have that. So initially, the problem in Iraq was not the invasion; it was afterwards. Again, the strategy. Why were we there? We didn't know why we were there. Suddenly we were in control of this country, and all the Iraqis were like, "Alhamdulillah, you're here. You've taken over. Now, what do you want to do?" And the Americans were like, "Oh, I don't know. We hadn't thought about that." They hadn't thought. They literally had not thought about what they would do once they took over in Iraq, right? And that's where the problem started, right? They de-Ba'athized. Okay, all the members of the previous Ba'ath administration have to go. Okay. Then they they disbanded the army. Everybody in the army, now you're unemployed. You got a gun, you got bullets, but you got no job, no income. Then they disbanded the police, right? And now nobody controlled the streets. The American troops had to go around patrolling, and they didn't speak Arabic. They couldn't talk to, they had no idea what these neighborhoods were. Anytime somebody poked their head out of a window, they thought it was a terrorist, and they would shoot them. You can't police with untrained troops who are only trained to kill. You can't police. Policing is the opposite of killing and occupying, right? So whenever they use these military analogies about police, it's like, this is the opposite. Policing means to keep place polite, polis, civilized. That's what the police is. They're supposed to maintain civilization, not just shoot somebody's head off if they, like, Iraqis would go up to a checkpoint and the Americans would hold their hands up like this. Literally. The American soldiers would say, "Stop, stop." And you ever seen those movies or you've been to an Arabic nightclub? This is how people dance. This is how they celebrate. Right? So the Americans are saying, "Stop, stop." The Iraqis are, yeah, we're so happy, yeah. The Americans are killing the people who love them most. That's why we lost the war in Iraq. It had nothing to do with we had perfect logistics, we had perfect military, everything. We just didn't know what the F we were doing in Iraq. The soldiers didn't know, the generals didn't know, the administrators didn't know. And then you get these administrators, I won't even go into them, coming down with these stupid, completely contradictory orders, not even culturally inappropriate. Forget culture, just administratively inappropriate. I'll have to do another about that. But I hope I've convinced you that 10, 20,000 American troops, all they could possibly do is die. That's the only option they have, is to die in Iran, right? We would need at least 500,000 troops, maybe 1 million. Where you would stage them from, the logistics of the operations of such is mind-boggling. Right? There is no comparison. You cannot take an army across thousands of miles to invade another place where you have no logistical support base. Right? Sure, they can fly everything by no, you can't do that. right? And here we got American troops that are used to having a freaking McDonald's and a Taco Bell when they invade a country, right? These are not troops with the ability to withstand suffering. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, any troops out there watching this, but today's soldiers, we do not have soldiers trained to go out and survive months in the field in a freaking cave, attacking cave by cave, right? Maybe we get that after a couple months of bloody, right? Remember the Nasserine Pass in Africa, when the American army was like, "Oh, we can do this like anybody else." People shooting, and 10 American divisions have to run and duck tail, and everybody thought the Americans were cowards for a year or so, until they were able to prove themselves finally in Africa and Sicily. But believe me, you don't want to see that happening, right? You're going to see those, because even in World War II, we had a purpose. We had a strategic purpose, a clear vision. Here, there is zero vision. It's not even an unclear vision. You just got word salad thrown out. Oh, weapons of mass destruction, nuclear, imminent missile. They haven't convinced even their own followers, right? You go onto the MAGA sites, not a single one of them has any clear idea of what we're doing in Iran. Not a one of them can. Why are we invading? Well, because Donald Trump is so smart. He must know what he's doing. He's playing 5D chess. So with that said, I'm going to end my stream. Shaggy's going to say goodbye. Oh, Shaggy Waggy's. We're going to hope somehow or other Trump gets out of this. And you know what? Will that mean we lose the war? Yes, we've lost the war. We lost the war the moment idiot had his nose pulled by Bibi Netanyahu to invade or attack a country where we had zero credibility, zero legitimacy, nothing. We had nothing. And then on top of that, blowing up did not help, right? And believe me, I'm in Iraq. Every school in Iraq is closed down because they are paranoid somebody's going to blow up a school. They don't know if it's going to be the Iranians or the Americans or the Israelis. They don't know, right? I don't think this is unparalleled. They didn't close down all the schools in any previous war. They had an 8-year war with Iran. They didn't close all the schools down, right? But now we got to have schools closed down because somebody might. This is stupid. But this is what happens in public paranoia, right? So I got to end the stream. And again, if you like any of this, listen to any of this. I know it's very long and maybe there's a lot of details. I'm very bad technically. But follow me, and I will try to post at least once a day with some interesting anecdote or relevant information. Bye, guys.